They were only around a short 9 seasons, but in their 7th year, this corps fielded a show that is one of the most revered in DCI history. The music of Wroblewski, the drill of George Zingali, the Cotton Bowl, the Cross to Cross. 1991 Star of Indiana, Roman Images. Let's run it back. Joining us for this 1991 Star of Indiana reunion, we have several members of the staff and design team. First, from the staff, Bob Medworth, former marching instructor for the Corps. Bob Dubinski, percussion caption head. Thom Hannum did percussion. Donnie Vandoorne was the brass caption head. Jim Prime was the brass arranger. Jeff Wroblewski was the color guard designer and part of the design team, along with Jim Prime, Jeff Wroblewski, Todd Ryan, George Zingali, and Lenny Krzyzewski. Not everybody could be with us. We invited a lot of folks to be with us for this, and those who can't were certainly regretting the fact that they couldn't join us because they really, really wanted to be here. Then we have several former marching members as well. Frank Sullivan was a rookie in 1991, marched second soprano. Josh Talbott, mellophone. Matt Harloff, second soprano. Ben Harloff, third soprano. Ron Hardin was a marching member, was a baritone. I hear the brother thing going on there. We'll get back to that at some point, I'm sure. Brian Souls played mellophone. Bobby Hullett was the drum major. David Carbone was a snare. And Tim Handley, a second soprano. Guys, thanks all of you for being here. Really appreciate it. Donnie Vandoorne, let's start with you. Because in a lot of ways, once we started the ball rolling on this reunion, you kind of picked it up and started wrangling folks together to have them all here. Why did you do that? Why did you try to reach out to as many people as possible?
Well, I think it's important to get together. I haven't seen some of these guys in years. It's always good to see the staff, my friends. Always good to see my kids. It was a good year. It was a good drum corps. I think that we were all blessed to be at the same place at the same time. And it would be good to, take a walk back in memory lane, and just share. I know some of the folks that we have on this Zoom are going to tell some really, really wonderful stories. And Josh is going to keep it clean.
I guarantee it, there will be great stories here. So let's dig right in with the name of the show. It was Roman Images. And Jeff and Jim, you guys were on the design team. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about the origins of Roman Images. What was the show in 90? I should have gone back and looked. Let's ask that first.
Very, very important what the program was in 1990. That was Belshazzar's Feast, based on the music of William Walton. And much like what happens as you're scaffolding in a series of years with any drum corps, 1990 was definitely a tremendous building block for 1991. Particularly the way it ended with a really brilliant, I think, performance in Buffalo. The Corps took giant leaps in terms of the maturity of the members and their ability to handle very sophisticated material. So I think that led us to believe that we could pull off a program like the 1991 Roman Images.
Was the uniform in 90 was it was the precursor to what you fielded in 91, correct?
Yeah, what happened was Jim Mason and Lenny were really a proponent of designing a new look every year. And I think at that point, we kept the jackets and the overlays became the new thing. So we did a new sash in 89 over the British show, and then we did a yoke, I think Lenny called it, over in 1990, what Jimmer was talking about. And it just kind of kept changing and evolving every season.
I actually came down to see you guys during finals week. I think you were in Waxahachie, Texas, is where you were housed at. Bobby, is that right? Do you recall?
That's correct. And I was going to say, because that's such a good point about us growing, because this is a memory for Frank and I. We were, our final run through, it was hot. It was the Texas, we had, Bloomington was the Texas simulator, and then we also had Waxahachie, which was another simulator getting ready for finals. And we did our final run through, and they invited the community. And some of the folks that they brought over were from a home basically just across from the stadium. And it was folks who were disabled in different ways. And some of them were older, some were younger. And at the end of the show, we did our show, and they cooked for us. And we had a great community moment with everyone there. And afterwards, they came up to me. We were getting everything ready, and I was talking to Frank, and they said, "Hey, could we talk to you for a second?" And I said, "Yeah." So we come over, and you know, Frank and I kind of looked alike back then, and kind of maybe still do. And so we walk over, and we're talking to these ladies who are probably, Frank, in their like late 60s, something like that. But their disability was that they were basically 8 years old, and they were giggling and, "Oh, you know, you guys are so cute," things like that. And so we just said, we talked to them, and it was really uplifting, you know, just felt good in the heart. And I said, "Can we take a picture with you all?" And they're like, "Oh, yes." So Frank and I let them wear our helmets, and we took a picture for them. And it was, you know, we didn't think much of it. You know, we're, you know, 20, 21, you know, years old, you know, kids. And so we said thanks. We get our helmets back, and we're starting to walk away. And the lady who was the administrator of the facility comes up, and she goes, "You don't understand what that just meant to them." She said that picture will hang on their wall until they die. And that, I remember it. I mean, it chills me to this moment, but I just remember that because it was something that we just thought, hey, we're just having a good time. We're talking to people. We were always really good with community members, but it was something that really impacted me as I'm sure it did with Frank too, just as a person, because it was, for us, it was trivial, but for them, it meant a whole lot.
Frank, you remember that?
I do. And, you know, that was an entire week we spent in Waxahachie. So the tour stopped. That's back when we had first tour, second tour. And so it was awesome of the staff to pick the surface of the sun for us to spend a week. And I can remember we couldn't really march on several parts. We ended up like marching on the parking lot because there were ruts in the ground this wide. I don't know if you guys remember that, but you know, your ankle could get caught in there. And I just remember, you know, it was a shock to my system. Couple things. First thing, I didn't go to my high school graduation because I knew that Donnie needed me in the circle. You know, like you don't need to wear a cap and gown. Get your butt in the circle. So that's what Tim and I did. We didn't go to graduation. You know, we got done with our last class. We're like, "Come on, Tim, get a car." And then, you know, we drove up to Bloomington, and so it was intense from the first moment. And then our schedule at move-ins was 8 to 12, 1 to 5, 6 to midnight. So we would take a little fruit snack break at 9:15 after ensemble, and then we still had 2 hours and 45 minutes of visual rehearsal. But by that time, our brains were fried. There were moths the size of birds all over that field because it was way in the, you know, it's back in the woods. And where I'm going with this is that type of work ethic got instilled in us right from the get-go at Move In. And so when we went to Waxahachie and we did that entire week without a break, I think we did laundry one night, but we may have done sectionals as well at the same time. But it was so hot. I just remember sitting there, as I was 17 at the time, and I was like, I can't believe that like I've just never been pushed that hard. So yeah, I remember that, Bobby, and I would have let anyone wear my helmet at that point. It didn't matter. Yeah.
Who came up with Roman images? Does anybody remember? Donnie, do you remember?
Jimmer, do you remember?
Yeah, I would certainly attribute a lot of the show ideas, and probably the title, to Jim Mason and Len Krasecki.
Okay.
I think they did a lot of the work in terms of the branding and all that, those kind of things. Certainly the costuming, as Jeff alluded to. Yeah, I think the title of the program probably came from Jim and/or Lenny and working together on that.
Jim Mason, of course, invited to be here as well, and unfortunately could not join us. But let's kind of work our way through the show as it opens up. you see the guard with very unique props. They're bows and arrows, basically, right? Big bows with arrows affixed to them, at least one of them on a string. Jeff Wroblewski, what do you remember about those props and coming up with them?
Well, those props were handmade with love in Chicago at my apartment with my brother. We went to the old Lowe's, I guess they call it, and Jim was exceptional. He gave me the core card and do what you can do. So talking with Lenny, we wanted to open up with a Roman image, kind of the arrow. So the end was a sponge and PVC pipe and some cord. So I started to tinker with it a little bit, came up with this arrow, said, whoa, got some tape, worked, and made about 10 or 15 of them, put them on the plane with me at O'Hare Airport. Off to Bloomington we went in a bike box, showed up, people liked them, we put them in. It created the effect that Jimmer wanted, and I think, again, what Jimmer always told me, make it look like one person wrote everything. And at that moment, it looked like Jimmer wrote the color guard parts, he wrote the music, he wrote the drum book, he staged everything, he designed the uniforms, and he drove the bus. All with that one moment. It was great.
That first impact, that big shield you're talking about, only 40 seconds into the show. And then the company front comes in about a minute and a half into the show, an early company front in those days. And the crowd response right then, from that first company front, the crowd was all in for the rest of the show. I was in the press box at the Cotton Bowl, and the press box was moving from the audience response. I would say that from about a minute and a half into the show, you had the crowd eating out of your hand in Dallas that night. Anybody want to talk about the crowd?
Honestly, I think we were just so trained on doing our job. I don't know if I really even noticed anything until we put our horns down at the end of the show, which we'll get to later. But that end of that opener was such a fun end of the opener. What I remember from that is I graduated high school that year, and I actually did go to my high school graduation. So Ben and I got to spring training a little bit late, and they had already learned the end of that opener, and Ben and I hadn't learned it yet. So we kind of watched a run through of that at IU Stadium, and it was fast. It was just seeing it, I was just like, wow, because there's a box rotation in there. Then they, comes out. It's just so well coordinated. Jimmer's writing was just awesome. It was great. Running into the company front, it was a 10. So I think I think Frank and I, of course, maybe this was Madison early, but we ended up in front of the front hash because, correct me if I'm wrong, I think the pit was split for that show. Is that right?
I was going to bring that up because, the pit was split, and that's the earliest I can recall seeing a split pit. Thom, Hannum, or Bob Dubinski, you want to comment on that?
Go ahead, Doobie.
Actually, Marty Hurley did it with Phantom, late mid-'80s maybe, and in 1990, there was a lot of the way Jimmer arranged the show for Belshazzar's. There was a lot of side-to-side, high brass, low brass, splitting up of the ensemble. So Thom and I had a discussion of, what do you think about maybe splitting the pit? And then, one side of the pit will play when the left side of the horn line's playing, and the other side of the pit will play when the other side of the horn's playing. We split up the battery as well to march with different sections. So we just carried that over into 91. And I think the visual, George loved it because he could bring people right down to that front area there to, rip some people's face off. So it was gave him more opportunity to use more field. So
I don't remember ever seeing the crowd there because I think Frank and I were in front of the front hash and our horns were to the box. Yeah. And I think at sometimes it was really high.
It was an eye box.
Yeah, and I don't think we put our horns down. Like, we went right into Villa right after that. So it was like, catch your breath.
Was that hit
and
number
go
one,
on to
Matt?
the next part.
Matt, was that hit number one?
No, it was
No?
two, because the shield, as
Shield.
Jeff talked about, was
Yeah,
that was one.
Yeah.
And then, but at the end of that part one, Dan, I'll just say this real quick, was so well coordinated. It was one of my favorite parts of the show. The box rotation, the Jimmer's writing, bing, boom, ba-ding, bum, some, da-ding, the dynamics put in there, just a 10. It was one of my favorite parts of the show for sure.
Yeah, we never noticed the crowd, Dan, because Donnie only ever let us watch the drum major.
Oh, and I mean, okay, so Tim, you were Ron, you were a mellophone player, right?
I was a baritone player.
You're a baritone player. Okay, I was going to say that those mellophone runs right there at the end of the opener, Donnie, those are intense, and there are a couple of moments like that throughout the show. What was that like to clean?
You're asking probably the wrong person. Josh, what was it like?
Yeah, Josh, what was it
Clean.
like? You did it.
Well, it was a challenge. There were a lot of notes in there, so I didn't notice the crowd because we were I was focused on the 10,000 notes we had to play and the and all the people just flying around the field. I thought I was going to die half the show. So but as far as cleaning those notes go, you talked about Waxahachie. That's where I grew to hate Barry Hudson. That was he beat us into the ground during that. You remember that?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so that was unbelievable. So yeah, we polished up in Waxahachie a lot of those notes. So.
Yeah, we also had the advantage of we had a lot of returning members of several years in that mellophone section.
Yeah.
And I think that we always kind of talked about it ourselves. I don't know, never really asked Jimmer about it, but we were like, because we have a lot of people, we figured out how to do all that stuff in Belshazzar's Feast the year before. We were hoping that, hey, maybe we are really good enough to be able to pull this off. And I would say by the time we hit that company front, we've probably already played 2,000 notes or something in the mellophone line. I mean, it was crazy. It was fun. Don't get me wrong, but it was difficult.
Yeah, there was a level of expectation that not necessarily came from me, but a lot of it came from within. So.
Well, as long as we're talking about mellophones and middle voices, just visually, Zingale was one of the first that and I've seen it several times in the intervening decades, but Zingale's visual design there, the way he would weave the middle voices visually through the rest of the ensemble when the middle voices had the melody was brilliant. That ever strike you?
The part about it, the part that I remember, I did some thinking this morning, is that we all had so much faith in the design team, and that everything George and Jimmer and everyone was going to do was going to fit together and blend together. And it just I think it gave everyone in the organization so much confidence, because you knew that whatever came next in the show was right and it fit, and the crowd was going to love it. And like was just said, the kids loved performing it. That was just a real special effort of all those designers that gave the kids something they could really, really enjoy performing. And we love teaching it.
Yeah, I think part of the magic of the whole design was once again, I think between Jim Mason and Len Krasecki, I think they really nurtured the brilliance of George Zingale, and you would use different ploys to do that. But once again, I think building off the Belshazzar's Feast, I think both Lenny and Jim told George Zingale, we want the magic of the end of that show to be the magic of the opener of our 91 show. And I think that was the whole premise. And thus you do see some similarity, but you see it taken even farther. So that was the impetus for, I think, the music, how it was arranged. I think it was always with that we had the magic of George Zingale on our side. So believe me, that was such a motivating factor.
I'm going to tell you one thing that you won't be able to unhear after this, but Tony Lyman and Drew Schneiders were in the pit and did the opening timpani phrase that you would hear. And what they would do is, as I would count it off, they would look at each other, and then what they would say is, as they played it, was barbecue sauce, and then. So,
now I will hear that every single time.
I can't not listen to it and not hear Tony go in my ear going barbecue sauce, barbecue sauce.
Speaking of iconic moments, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention Thom's riding through that whole letter B to the end of the block rotation when he came across the front. That was just some of the most creative writing, and just, you know, the incredible opportunity to play. It's really visceral stuff. Just that amazing moment of the drum line coming down the front.
You guys were crab stepping demons, man. You were flying sideways, and this was still pretty early on in the whole crab step sideways part of drum corps. This was still a new visual development for the way drum lines moved, right, Dave?
Well, yeah, I think we had been moving crab step for a few years before that, certainly, but that was the first time I'd ever moved at that velocity.
At that velocity. Thom, were you ever worried about them being able to play moving sideways that fast?
No, not really. I don't know that I ever gave that a whole lot of thought because, you know, I guess having been at Garfield with, you know, Donnie and Jimmer and Zingali, you know, I got exposed to that real fast.
We've been there, done that.
And I just, you know, like, I can't remember who said it, but it's like, you know, we just trusted what was going on, and the members were up to it, you know. So, provided they were conditioned, you know, we were pretty good to go. So, I think I always was up for seeing what we could do to move things further along. So.
The second movement production piece was Villa Borghese, and it starts out with, the best way I can describe it is this sparkling soundscape that is portrayed visually as well as a drill kind of opens up and it starts to sparkle too. And part of that soundscape was marching Glockenspiels.
Again, something that we started toying with, and I love Jimmer's, you know, 90 was pivotal. And I don't want to dwell too much on 90, but we were at a camp, Donnie, you probably remember this the best, when we were talking about splitting the brass, and there was like one trumpet player, one.
Brutal.
One. And here he is on one side of the playing by himself. We're 2 weeks away from opening day. I mean, it was just like, what are we doing here? This is like unbelievable. So, you know, because we were doing all this split stuff, the exposure was unbelievable. You know, so here's the whole soprano section with 4 people in it, one guy playing lead in May. So that offered a lot of exposure, but I think the reward in the end, by the time we got to Buffalo, was like, I thought we should probably keep this going, this location, trying to have sounds. We did it in '92 with the handbells, and we did it with the beginning of the Villa Borghese with the marching bells. And we just thought it'd be cool to create that shimmering effect all over the field by a location standpoint, instead of just everything being down front.
Yeah, as a performer, like I remember, you know, just having such concentration through all those attacks, all those, you know, just everything lining up. And it as a performer, it was so fun because it really helped develop me and a lot of people around us, like, you know, just to be, you know, very serious about the, you know, approach that we were always taking. Obviously with the staff that we had no choice, but I think that it was such a fun ride to be able to play and perform that after the season, looking at just that portion of the show and just reflecting back and looking at it and thinking about all the hard work it took to put that together from everybody. It was amazing, even to this day. So
yeah, if I may add a little prop to George Zingali as well. During those rehearsals in May where we had like half a corps out there, he kept saying, "We're going to be great. We're going to be great. We're going to be effing great." And we're all looking at each other and saying, "Who is he talking about?" He just had this vision in his head, and he knew. I mean, that guy was, yeah. George Z.
Man, he was something else, and you just learned to trust him. You know, when I first met George, it was his first meeting at Garfield, and I really didn't know of George then. I knew he came from the Lancers, and I know when he walked in, you know, my words to George were, you know, listen, you know, this is about the brass, and I don't really give a shit what you do when they're not playing. They can stand in their head for all I care, but you better not screw up my brass section. And it started from this. Every time he wanted to do something and push the boundaries, you know, he would kind of look at me and just see what I was thinking. But you know, I learned to trust George, and he was quite the genius. You know, you wouldn't know it, but he when you got to know George, you learned it.
I'll tell you something funny. There's more on the Cross of the Cross, of course, but you guys that are all in the field with us will remember this, but there was a time where we were running something and George was all amped up and he was so endearing and so motivational, inspiring, all of those things. And there was a part where we were running a section of the show and like we start and it doesn't go exactly right. And he goes, stop. And he's yelling from the top. He goes, I don't understand why the Star of Indiana can't play this. No, together. You've got the best drum major in the history of DCI in front of you. And everybody on the field just goes, oh God. And I thought, oh, thanks, George. He says, do it again. So we run it again and it falls apart. And he goes, Bobby Hullett, you're the worst drum major in DCI history. I mean, the very next round, I'm like, got it. Reset.
I would say in regard to George Nagali, in the times that I worked with him, I wouldn't put one note on the score paper without considering what he could do with it. That pretty much sums up my writing relationship with George. I totally trusted him. More than that, I totally yielded to just what he could do and the spectacular, you know, from concept to execution. He was just amazing, just amazing.
He brought such a, sorry, go Tom.
No, I was going to say, I think you saw what you heard, and you heard what you saw with George's writing, and he was, you know, you think of orchestration like in music, he orchestrated the drill, but absolutely put people in the right places at the right times and almost without fail, you know, and masterful in that regard. And obviously the effect of what he could create was second to nothing we've ever seen. So to have the structure and the organization within the effect is mind-boggling, actually. So it's incredible.
Bob, can you talk a little bit, Bob Medworth, about George Z and about cleaning his work too?
Correct. And if you let's get past the genius of his drill writing, then there was just being around him and the inspiration and the energy that he brought to rehearsal. I'll choke up talking about it, but you wanted to please him. You wanted to equal his talent. And I remember one time we got done and we had busted our tails, the kids and all the staff, and we got done and it was just, I don't even know where we were. The rehearsal was over and he took the whole visual staff out for ice cream. And that was like, okay, I just won a Tony Award, you know? It's not going to get any better than George Zingali buying the visual staff ice cream. And it was just so much fun.
With his last nickel.
Pardon me?
Yeah. With his last nickel.
Yeah, well, he probably borrowed the money, but
yeah. I was going to say it was probably somebody else's nickel that he borrowed.
On a more serious note, I really have to credit and admire Jim Mason in the sense that he really nurtured George in this particular year through, some difficult times for George, certainly health-wise. And I think Jim was very, very careful and caring, as I said, to nurture George through this, and really enabled George to have his, stroke of genius. And we all just benefited from that.
Yeah, I'll add that I'll kind of piggyback on what Bob was saying. I mean, we could talk another 6 hours on George's genius, on his creativity, but he was able to help and guide us to love each other more than we already would have anyway. And I think that is his drill and creative genius, is no doubt about it. But if you never had the opportunity to work with him, that's something you may not know. Like, you know, he made us love each other more. He made us care about each other more. And we were so tight as a drum corps during that time. And there are many reasons for that, but George is definitely one of those reasons.
I see your brother nodding a lot as you're talking there. Ben, what are you thinking about?
Well, in 1991, I was 15 years old. So to be honest, I don't remember a lot of these stories, or a lot of these stories blend in, especially with 90 and 91. But to be honest, I had blinders on. You know, I tried to do everything that I could to not mess it up, you know, being so young and so inexperienced. But
were you the youngest member of the Corps, you think?
There was
one
other.
Well, the year before, Ben, you were 14. Ben was 14 in 90.
In 90.
Yeah, Ben was everybody's little brother.
Yeah.
Wow. But I was going to say about George, like Matt said, he taught life lessons. You know, when he would bring us in and talk about the design of the show or whatever's going on in that part of the summer, he would always relate it to his life and as a person. Like drum corps is not just drum corps, just band for him. It was his life, and he expressed that to us, which is obviously really, really amazing and special. But one special memory that I have of George is when we were on tour, and maybe a few other members he did this with, but when we were on tour, you know, when whatever we were getting ready for the show and we would have to load the buses, he would have me bring his suitcase to the staff bus, and then he would give me $2 because I did that. I'll never forget it. Absolutely never forget it.
First time I met George was the 91 audition camp, and just rolling into that parking lot, you know, butterflies in my stomach, and I was about to throw up. I was so nervous. And walking into the like right before you get in the foyer, there's this guy, and he goes, "What's your name?" And, you know, I told him, and you know, he's, "Okay, I'll call you Sully." And I was like, okay. So I walk in, and I said to Tim Handley, I said, "Who's a homeless guy?" Because he had like a plaid shirt, it was unbuttoned, and he was just like someone you would go by, you know, on the street, and you would go, "Wow, that guy is a little bit like he's insane." And Tim goes, "That's George Zingali," and I was like, "What?"
Before we get to the ballad, the drill speed, the beats per minute at the end of Villa Borghese, right around the 420 mark, I pulled a metronome out, 184 beats per minute. So you were flying.
Oh, that's slow.
Yeah, it's slow at the end of the show, that's for sure. All right, the ballad. This is the first time that the cross there's a kind of a foreshadowing maybe of the end of the show, because the guard presents the cross there in the ballad. It's absolutely beautiful, and it's a real change of pace from the second number. Jim Prime, why don't you start talking about the ballad?
Well, I think, as we know, you know, the Roman images, the source material came from the Respighi, what we refer to as the triptych of Respighi, but a lot of it came from Roman festivals and some of it from Pines of Rome. And we just thought it was the perfect counterpiece to everything else in the program, which is kind of, as we say, fast tempo and, you know, that kind of hyper energy. So when we slow it down, it really creates quite a contrast. And we were able to do that once again, referring back to the 1990 show. We had a moment like that in 1990. I think when you have that kind of energy and you take it way down, it creates quite a contrast. And thus, I think the visual was absolutely gorgeous to all that, and really portrayed the musical mood.
I was going to say, Jeff might remember this. So during 91, there were a lot of moments of foreshadowing and just different, like, really cool things that dealt with, like, real life and in the show. And we were in Rome, New York. And the chorus all split, and everybody's doing their own little sectional type thing. And the color guard's in the stadium. So I'm walking around and checking on everybody, just seeing, making sure that we're all on schedule, seeing if anybody needs anything. And I'm starting to walk into the stadium, and Wroblewski's coming out, and he goes, "Come with me." And I said, "Okay." So, I'll come with you. So we start walking out, and he doesn't tell me anything first. I was like, "What are we doing?" He goes, "We're just going to walk around for a minute." So we walk, and we go behind the stadium, the front stands, and we're looking. And then he says, "We're going to build a prop." And I'm like, "I'm all in, whatever it takes." So all of a sudden we're looking under the stands, and we just happen to look over, and there is a pile of wood, 2x4s. And on top of these 2x4s are two of them that are like this. And he goes, "That's it." And I go, "Okay." And he goes, "Grab those." And so I go walking over, and I grab these two planks, and the cross that you see in the show, those are the actual boards. That we didn't cut them. We didn't do anything else. That's just, they've got the jagged edges and things like that. And he goes, "All right, we need to put this together." There's a maintenance van underneath there. And so we go around, and I look, because, I'm trying to be the upstanding guy, and I look, there's nobody there. So we just basically open up the back of his truck, and there's a bunch of tools. And I'm like, all right. So we grab out hammer and nails. I nail the cross together. And we hold it up, and it's old wood. And we hold it up, and we look, and Jeff goes, it's not distressed enough. And I'm like, I don't know what that means. So I had to learn what distressing was. And so I took the back end of the hammer, and we started putting all the notches in it all the way through it, and just hammered the heck out of this thing and got done with it. And he goes, "Yeah, that'll do." And I was like, "Okay, cool." So build this cross, he takes off. The next thing I know, we come into rehearsal later on. It's got the gold at the top and the bottom. It's got the red and the white material, and it's beautiful. It's gorgeous, and had a little bit of stain or something on it. I mean, just looked fantastic. And I think they may have gotten stain out of the guy's truck too. I'm not sure.
So, okay, to review, that cross was made of stolen wood with borrowed tools that the guy didn't know was being borrowed. Is that right?
In Rome, New York.
In Rome, New York.
In Rome, New York.
True Roman wood.
And true Roman wood. So like it was meant to be. And at the end of the season, I was talking with Jeff, and I was like, "Are we going to do anything with this?" And because it had, like, for most of us, for all of us, the show had a big impact on us for all these different reasons. But he said no, and I said, "I'd like to have it if that's all right." And he said, "Okay." So I've got it's here with me.
I'm sorry, you have the cross there with you?
I have the cross with me.
If we would have known that, we would have had you, like, show it to us right now.
Go get it, Bobby.
It's upstairs. I can go get it if you want me to.
Bobby Hullett knows what makes that old rugged cross rugged. That's
exactly right. Well, hammer.
I just like to think about, like, someone sitting in the stands in the back row, then they happen to look down, and they see two people in their star jackets hacking a cross with a hammer. Like, wow, that had to be a little shocking.
Well, and the thing where this place was, every time I hit the wood with the hammer, I mean, just echoed through the trees, and I'm like, oh my goodness,
I remember that story well, and I remember the whole time. It was great. Thanks for helping me with all that.
Oh, it was one of my favorite moments I ever got to spend time with you, Jeff.
Awesome.
I just think of whoever's truck that was and whoever's pile of wood that was, they have no idea what something of theirs, what it means to an entire activity. That's the coolest story, Bobby. Thank you for sharing that. That's amazing. Well, Jeff, we're going to go back to you here first, because the first thing I want to talk about for the rest of the show is another guard prop. It's those spinning plates, for lack of a better word, the gold plates that the guard had. Where did those come from? Whose idea was that? And tell us a little bit about how they were made.
Well, they were, again, from Chicago. But anyway, it was a earlier season. And then in 91, we decided to use them again. But basically, it's a little Polish kid walking around the hardware store up in Chicago going, what can we do? And we're looking for something that's a little flashy. So, an idea of different geometric shapes, things that rotate. We put it together. And basically, we turned them into bike rims. So now it was 32-inch bike rim, so really solid.
Oh.
And casters that were industrial strength. And so if you were spinning them, you really had to watch your chin because you could really break some skin easy. But you needed the weight to get the speed going. And the reason for the speed is the reflection, that pop. Every time it would rotate, you'd get that pop. So that was the great thing. It turned out to be a great effect for the whole team. And another thing too, I remember going up to Doobie, and Doobie came over and he said, "Hey, I got a good idea for you. Let's create a sound with that." And I don't know if Bob remembers it, but we went walking over at IU Stadium, we were rehearsing. And Bob, you remember they were changing the field goal posts, and you found a little chunk of it.
Yeah.
And you took that piece and you hung it on a rope up in the pit somewhere. And you took a metal mallet. So when we really cranked those things, you hit basically the IU field goal post. And you got it really moving, and it was brilliant sound. There it is. That's how the prop kind of came around.
We stole everything we can get our hands on.
Well, I mean, Jim, when you saw those plates, and you've got the block builds, and you've got the big musical hit that you've written there, and then you see the impact visually of those plates. Do you recall the first time you saw that put in?
Absolutely. That's one of my favorite moments of anything that I was ever a part of. To me, just spectacular. And yeah, absolutely. I recall that.
Well, we've arrived at the cross to cross. This is one of those drum corps stories that if you're around this activity enough, you'll hear it told several times, and it seems like it changes a little bit depending on the storyteller, and given all these years, that's easy to understand. But it generally involves a very late rehearsal. I think it was finals week. You guys tell me, was it in Waxahachie, and did it involve George Zingali basically physically moving around every single member of the corps and writing the drill off the top of his head right there and then on the spot?
I would just say that it did occur in Boston, Massachusetts at Boston University Stadium. And I believe it was about 12 to 13 days before finals. Okay. So it was not finals week, but it was the week previous to finals.
Jimmer, didn't we do a new ending that didn't quite work?
Yes, yeah. That was a part of it also. Yeah.
It was right before Lynn, Massachusetts.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah. Do you guys mind if I give a version of this?
Please. Yes.
Okay, so I have a personal, this is one of the most personal moments in my life ever in anything. I've been on the planet 49 years. So we're in the stadium, and we did this thing, and I remember Josh especially saying this because talking about it, but we had this thing that was a crown that went away and ended up in a crown again, and no one's really happy. We're like, this can't be the ending of the show, and everybody's not happy. And then we knew that George was sick, and we're wondering what was going to happen. And all of a sudden, right near the end of ensemble rehearsal, in comes George. And so we take a quick break, and we come back, and it's 9:00, and he comes up, and he goes, okay, he's trying to he was really tired and had no energy, but he's trying to be as energetic as he could. And he said, okay, that whole ending that you worked all day on, he goes, it's a piece of shit. He goes, just, we're not going to do it. And everybody goes, yay, everybody goes crazy. He goes, so we're going to learn something new, and you're going to do this on the field, and you're going to do all this basic swings. We're going to learn all this together. So, but he said, we got to be quiet because there's a noise ordinance. We got to, kind of start being quieter. So he comes over to me and he says, this is what we're going to do. He said, I'm going to take a section of the corps and I'm going to move them. And then after I move them, everything's in 8 counts. I'm going to go to the next section. You go behind me and run this for 8 counts. Just run it. Todd's going to be charting it up top. And then when you get done with them, come to the next section I just finished, and we'll basically do it piecemeal, back and forth, back and forth. So we start going from section to section. And then the fun part was, I remember the mellophones always asking, can we do more? Can we do more? Can we do more? Trying to challenge him, trying to challenge what they could do. At one point, the drum line, he was working with the horn so much, the drum line asked, well, what do you want us to do or something like that? And George, said, just write it yourself. And so the bass drums are like, all right, we're going to pinwheel this around. And the snares are like, we're going to do this. And they wrote some incredible self-drill for all of that. And so I'm condensing the story just for time's sake, but we get through all of the different sections. We took a break about halfway through, and George ate like a Snickers bar and sat there and keeps going, keep running sections. We're running it down tempo, and then we get the entire thing done. Everybody, no one's tired. I think it's like 1:30 in the morning. No one's tired. We're all amped up. And George was done. He didn't, as far as I remember, he didn't even stay to see the run because he was just so exhausted and so tired. So he leaves, and we get up, and we had run it set to set, and then Todd at the top, everybody, the food staff had come in, brass, everybody's there, and they're all in there. And Todd, he's talking through the Lone Ranger really, really quietly. And he says, okay, we're going to run the entire thing. And I'm like, got it. And he goes, Bobby, we're going to take it down tempo. And I turned around and I said, I got it. And I turned around and looked at everybody on the corps, like really quietly. And I said, you guys want to go down tempo? And they had some choice words for me. I was like, I got you. And so I counted it off. And as I counted off at tempo, the last thing I heard was Todd Ryan going, no! And we started it. And we went full tilt from top to bottom, singing at the top of our lungs. And at the end, we bring the horns down, we sit there, and I turn around, all I see are papers flying in the air in the stadium, going down and everything else. And it was the greatest ending in drum corps history. And we performed it at Lynn, Massachusetts, like 3 days later.
It was cool to see our staff that elated. I mean, they were literally, after an entire day of learning a new ending, really hot that day, I remember too. And then the frustration of, gosh, that new ending doesn't work, to the exuberance, like just the energy of creating that whole end. And by the way, there were a lot of visual staff members that had a lot to do with that drill. Like George, and correct me if I'm wrong, guys, but I think George worked mainly with the mellophones, and then he would go around and spot check. But like Joe Keys and Ken Carlin and Bob Medworth, and they also had a big hand in creating. I know at least for the Sopranos, creating some of that drill. We just knew that they had, what was it, 8 sets of 8? Yep. 8 sets of 8 to get from the cross to the cross. So and then some people would run into each other. I reset. Let's not do that. But the visual staff as a whole was a huge part of creating the cross to cross.
I wanted to go to David Carbone as a member of the snare line. Is that true that the battery kind of wrote its own drill for the cross to cross?
Yeah, if I got back up just before that, it was at Boston, and I remember vividly getting off the bus thinking, man, we're going to have an incredible ensemble rehearsal. We haven't had a block of time like this in a long time, and they get the percussion. All right, go ahead and get your stuff. And the whole leading up to that, the staff was just kind of laid back. They're like, okay, let's just kind of warm up. All right, take about a 10-minute break. And we're like, what's going on? It's right before Lynn. We're getting the championship. And we didn't know what was going on. They didn't tell us, the horn line's learning a new ending or anything. They finally said, all right, they're ready for us. So those of you who remember, I think, if I'm not mistaken, that it's a bowl stadium, right? So the percussion, as we entered the stadium, we were at the top. And this is when the horn line was finishing up their last few runs. And I remember we were all walking down with our equipment, making sure we wouldn't fall down the stairs. And then the whole drum line just stopped. And we were watching the horn line do the run. And I don't think anybody said anything. I just remember I did this. I went. It was just such a visceral. And we were like, well, let's get down there. Let's learn our part. And then, like you said, it's just like, all right, just write your own drill. And we were excited just to be part of that incredible moment.
I remember that day getting phone calls. I wasn't there, but I remember getting phone calls that day telling me about the old new ending that was not very good. And so I called George and I said, George, what's going on? And he said, it didn't work, but I've got some ideas, but I'm going to have to push it. And I said, well, George, remember that conversation we had way back at the Garfield Cadets? Just forget that. You know, you just do what you got to do, and we'll figure it out. You know, he said, well, they're going to run. I said, oh, you just do what you got to do, and and we'll figure it out. And he did.
I remember, like with George, there would be, you know, a few moments through the course of several years of working together with him, but there's times where you just get out of the way.
Exactly.
You just get out of the way, and you just let him do what he needs to do. And we experienced a few of those along the way, and obviously this was one of those. And it's just he was a unique guy who could do things on the spot, really unlike anybody that I've ever seen. So.
Hey Dan, I have an interesting story about the cross to cross.
Yeah, Jeff, go ahead.
In honor of Jim Mason, who at that point, he showed me a side of him. He was very caring, and Lenny and Todd. Jim came up to me, it was before Boston, but we were clearly there. He said, you know, do you think there's an ending issue? And I said, yeah, there's something there, something wrong with it. Jimmer felt the same way, and Donnie and everyone felt that same way. So Jim said, hey, we're all going to go out for dinner. George was not feeling well at all, but he was there. So he could barely even walk to the van. So I'd help him, and Jim was helping him to the van. So Jim Mason, George Zingali, myself, and Todd Ryan were in this van. So we start heading off to May Zingali's house to try to talk through this ending, to see if we could come up with something. George was very quiet. Then we start driving, and, you know, it was just kind of calm. And we get into his old neighborhood where George grew up. And he said, Jim, turn here. And he turned, you know, right. And he said, stop. So he pulled over. And I don't know, I know George and I went in, but it was St. Anthony's Church was right there. But he said, take me inside. So we walked slowly inside, and he said, I just want to sit for a minute. So we found him a pew. He sat all by himself, and I sat over there, and he started to kneel just by himself. But I figured it was time for George to have his moment, because he wasn't feeling well at that time of his life. And then it was about 15 minutes. And then he looked over at me and said, come here. And then he goes, I can't get up. So I helped him up, and we walked back out of the church, which he grew up in, I guess. And we walked back to the van, and then we drove just down this little street. And Donnie, you may remember May's house in Jimmer, right on that corner there. And we turned, and then we all went in, and she had eggplant, the whole 9 yards. And Jim Mason was very caring, and Lenny was there. And so we had dinner, and it was great. George was drinking sangria a little bit. He had it all spread out. And we start watching the end of the show on this video screen, old TV, I guess. And we start thinking, drawing things, you know, and the cross, and one cross came in and the other cross came in. And I remember one time he drew the cross, and he literally had tears coming out of his eyes. And then I don't know where it came from, but the birth of the cross happened. Wherever it happened, he said, I think I've got it. And it was just the idea was born. It gives me goosebumps to see that transformation. And there's only a time I've ever told that story. But I love the caring qualities of so many people, of a human being that was in the later stages of their life. And it wasn't about a score. It was about people who all cared. And I couldn't be more proud of being part of the whole design team. But I thought you guys might want to hear the little excerpt of how the seed was actually born from that. I don't know if it was from the Church of St. Anthony's, could have been, but it certainly probably inspired him in certain ways.
Build into the cross. It's a very important statement. It's a statement about life. It's a statement about how much work you've done all year. It's a statement about your beliefs in life and God and you and who you are.
You could look at all of the Christian religious iconography in this show and just say, well, it's Roman images. I understand what he's doing, but Jeff, you just made that very personal, and now I don't think I'll be able to watch this show without realizing, where George Zingali was spiritually.
Yeah, I want to. Can I set a little context for
Sure.
that night? Okay, so on this particular night, we got to see old George again. I mean, at the beginning of the night, he was tired, and he was visibly, and even listening to him, he was run down. But by the end, that guy was running around the field, yelling. He was excited. He could tell what this was going to look like from up top. So I think all of us members were feeding off of that as well, because we were on a mission once he got rolling on that.
Jimmer, you were there, right?
I was there. It was really incredible. It was really incredible because, I obviously I knew George fairly well and been through a lot with George, and to see it just sparkle and come together as a real shining moment for him was very rewarding. But let me really emphasize this as a member of the design team, which I'm very proud of. Let's look at two other factors here. The technical training that came from the technique staff, visual, brass, percussion, anywhere you can look, certainly in the color guard. That gave the design team the confidence to write what they wanted to write. George Zingali, as great as he was, could never have done the cross without the staff that could make it work. And now let's go to the next level. And I talked about the maturation of the marching members as an offshoot in development from 1990 and everything we went through in 1991. They were at a point where they could pull this off. And it's truly amazing, and a testament to the whole organization and a testament to the whole drum corps of 1991. And, let's not forget that it takes everyone, and it took everyone to make that happen. And just happy to be a part of that.
The beauty of 1991, when we talk about everybody being on the same page and being a team effort. Now, I think we won a world championship, and we did not win one caption outright.
Right. You tied in both brass and percussion, I believe, right? But didn't win anything outright.
We won nothing outright.
I don't know if there's a better place to leave this. I could go around and ask each of you for a final thought on Star 91, but really, I think
we forgot. I do want to interrupt then. I think we forgot. I don't think there was a moment that any of us ever set foot on the property or on a bus or anything that we weren't grateful for Bill Cook.
I think that anyone that would invest in a drum corps has to have that feeling that they are doing something that will benefit others. I also feel that, as I mentioned before, that they have to have a community and social responsibility to their community. But I gained more from the number of people in drum corps that are affected by what we are doing with the activity. Their lives are changed permanently, and I can say for the better.
You knew everything you did, that he was behind it, and that he was so caring and did all that for us. And I think we all just constantly felt like we were the luckiest people alive, and the luckiest drum corps staff alive. Because anything we had, anything we needed, we had. And we knew we had that support. And it was so great to be a part of that organization and watch it grow. And I think we felt like we were all, even though a lot of you were East Coast guys or whatever, I think a lot of us felt like we were a bunch of Midwest corn-fed hill jacks who didn't quite know what we were doing. Yep. And we worked our way to the top. but we knew Bill was behind us the whole way, and we loved that about him.
Donnie, you want to follow up on that?
Yeah, completely supported by the organization, Bill and Jim. Especially with Jim. Jim is a brass guy, and in all my years of being a brass captain at Star, not once did Jim ever micromanage the brass program. And I always appreciated that a lot. And Bill just is always there, driving the bus. just awesome.
Literally.
Yeah, driving
literally
the bus. Just incredible.